In our last word processing lesson, we made a business letter, which is very formal and nothing fancy. There's no fancy colors, fancy typefaces. It's very simple and businesslike and to the point, conveying information. So this isn't always the kind of document we want to create. Sometimes we want to create something a bit flashier, eye-catching, perhaps for a flyer or a sign that needs to be hung up and seen from across the room or across the street. So today we're going to learn some features that allow you to do text formatting, to take the text that's in a word processing document and format it so it looks a little different than a plain business letter type text. So in the assignment today, I've given you a Google Doc to start off with. We'll be using this in the free Google Docs word processor, and we're going to be making a sign that would be hung in the computer lab to warn people not to bring food and drink into the computer lab. So the text that we're going to type is fairly simple. No food or drink in the computer lab. So simple text, but if I hung this up, no one would pay attention to it because the letters are small, it's boring, it's black and white, and it's too small to read. So let's address the too small part by talking about how we might change this text and make it larger. But before we do that, in order to change any of the text that you've already typed, you need to tell the computer or the word processor what text you want it to change. And to do that, we need to select the text. And in order to select the text, we need to, with the mouse cursor, click at the beginning of the text we want to select, and then drag to the end of the text that we want to select, and it will highlight it and it will shade it in, and you can see that in a minute. So I'm going to click at the beginning of the word food, and I'm going to drag to the end of the word drink. So I'm going to click and hold the mouse button down. My mouse button is held down. I'm going to drag, and as I drag, you can see it changes it highlights it in the blue color. And when I let go, it stays there. So now any tools that I choose from the toolbar will affect this text that I have selected. So it won't affect anything else. It'll just affect the text that's selected. Up here in the toolbar, we're going to be talking about this kind of center section of tools we have here. The first one, this number, is the font size. So this is the size of the letters of the text that are on the screen. And if I change this, it will change the text that I have selected. In this case, it's 11-point font. Larger numbers are larger sizes. So if I choose 24, then you can see that's a little bit larger. If I choose 96, that's really large, and it's so large that it makes it wrap around to the next line. Well, that's too big. I don't want it. I want it to stay on the same line. So let's click on this menu and pick something a little bit smaller. How about 72? Okay, that sounds good. Now I want to work on my other text. Now I don't have to just select one line at a time. I could select more than one line. So if I click anywhere else, I can clear that selection. And then I'm going to select in the computer lab altogether. So again, it's click and hold the mouse button down at the beginning of what you want to select and drag straight down to the end. So I don't have to kind of follow it line by line. I can just go straight from beginning to end, from before the I and in to the end of the B in lab. So I'll click and hold the mouse button down and drag straight down after the B, and now it's selected both of those lines. Again, I'm going to change the font size again, so I'll click on that drop-down menu, and I'll choose, let's see how 60 works. That looks pretty good. One thing to note, when text is selected, if I accidentally type something on the keyboard, it'll automatically replace whatever I had typed. Oh no, now I've lost my words. But thankfully, there is an undo button, this very first button on the toolbar, the curvy arrow. This is just like it was in Microsoft Word. We can click that button and it'll undo the last thing that we did. Phew, it brought my text back. Awesome. I can click anywhere in a blank space and it will clear that selection. Now I want to make the word no pretty big, so I'm going to click and drag, select that word no, and I'm going to see, can I do 96? That's good, but maybe I want it even bigger, and you could actually type in a number in there. So I'm going to type 124. Ah, that's really big. That's good. So you can type larger numbers in here if you want. You don't have to go with what it already has for you. Awesome. What else can I do? So this font it's kind of the same font that we use in a business letter, Arial, a very plain font, but maybe I want to choose another font, which is kind of the way that the shapes of the typeface, how the letters look. So I'm going to click and drag from the beginning all the way to the end to select all of my text, and I'm going to choose one font for the whole sign. And that's this right here. So Arial, this is the font menu. If I click on this drop-down menu, you can see there's lots of different fonts, from really big bold ones to some that are kind of scripty and fancy, and some that are plain. This one, this Impact, that's a nice big bold font. I bet we could see that from across the room. So I'm going to choose that one, and it makes it this nice big bold font. That looks good. All right. So font is here. You can see if I select again, if I picked something else, let's say I picked this Pacifico, that one's a little kind of scripty, so a little bit different. You can play around and you can take a look at some of the other fonts that are there. This one's called Lobster. This one's called Georgia. But I think I'm going to stick with Impact because I like the boldness for a sign. All right. Other things you can do, there are, next to the font size, there are these three, I call them styles. They don't change the font, but they change the way the font looks. So bold makes it a little bit darker, italic makes it slanted, and underline puts an underline under it. So it just adds emphasis. So I'm just going to select all my text so you can see what these look like. And you can toggle them on and off, use more than one at a time. So if I hit B for bold, you can see it just makes everything a little bit heavier, a little bit darker. And if I click it again, that'll turn it off. I makes it italic, so it slants everything. And then I can turn it off again. And then underline puts an underline underneath it and turn it off. I kind of like the underline for this sign, but I think I just want it on the word no. So I'm going to click to clear my selection and then click and drag to just select the word no, and then I'll choose the underline. All right. The next over that I want to talk about is color, because sometimes black is just not enough. You want to make it stand out a little bit more with color. So again, you have to select the text first. So I'm going to select no again. And if I click on the text color, it's this letter A with a bar underneath it. And you'll get a whole rainbow of colors to choose from. So I could do something purple. I could do a green, but I think I'm going to do this bright red. That'll make that sign really stand out. And I'm going to make in the computer lab also that same red. So I'm going to click and drag to select in the computer lab. And I'm also going to make that bright red. Food or drink, I'm going to change the color, but I'm going to do it in a little different way. I'm going to use this next tool over, which is the highlight color. And that changes kind of the background behind the letters as if you dragged a highlighter pen on top of it. So I'm going to click and drag to select that text. And in the highlight color, I'm going to choose a nice highlighter yellow color. And you can see it changes the background of behind the letters. So no food or drink in the computer lab. That is very bright. Someone would have a hard time missing this from across the room. So we did font, we did font size, we did bold, italic, and underline, the text color, and the highlight color. We're going to skip this middle section here, and we're going to go over to the section with all these lines. These are the alignment tools. Right now, everything in my document is lined up along the left margin. But sometimes you don't want it on the left side. Sometimes you might want it centered in the middle, or maybe you want it on the right side. What you don't want to do is you don't want to space things over to get things to where you want them to line up. You'll never get things exactly lined up, and the computer can do it for you automatically. So I'm going to select all of my text again, And we're going to use the alignment tool. So you can see right now the left align button is selected already because I said everything is lined up on the left margin. This next one over is center alignment, and if I click it, everything automatically pops to the middle of the document. So you can see everything is perfectly centered, no spacing required. And that's the way you want to get things centered. You want to let the computer do that centering for you. Next to the center align button is the right align button, and that will line things up on the right margin automatically. And this next button I don't use very often. This is justify, and without it only works with texts that have paragraphs in them. And actually, I'll pop back over to the volunteer gala just to show you what it looks like. If I select all of my paragraphs and choose justified alignment, you can see that it spaces out my paragraphs so that both the right margin and the left margin are center. Now, you would never do this in a business letter. The only time you would ever do that is if you were writing a newsletter or a newspaper that has columns on it. Otherwise, you would never use justified. Justified alignment, you would only use in something that has columns, like a newspaper or a newsletter. So we're going to ignore justify right now. So I'm going to switch it to center because I think for a sign, having things centered on the middle of the page, that looks great. All right, the last thing I'm going to do isn't really related to text alignment, but when I'm making signs, I usually always put some kind of image in here to insert an image. And I'm going to click at the end of the last thing I typed and just hit enter to move my cursor down here below my text. And this is where I want to put some images of just some pictures of food or drink so people get the idea. To insert different things into a document, that we can type text in, but if we want to insert other things, we'll want to use this insert menu up in the top. And the very first choice is to insert an image. And I don't have any images I want to use, so I'm going to search the web. I'm going to actually find something online. So when I click search the web, it pops up this image, Google image search over here, and I can type something I want to look for. So I'm going to look for a hamburger. I'm just going to type that in and hit enter. And it's going to find whatever hamburger images it can find on the internet. And it's showing a lot of photographs. I'm going to see if I can find like an illustration, something that looks drawn rather than an actual full photograph. So I'm going to keep scrolling, keep scrolling. Oh, look, there's one with a smiley face. Now, sometimes some of these images don't work, so don't be surprised. I'm going to hit insert. And that one did work. Great. If you ever get like a red message saying that it doesn't work, just go ahead and pick something else. When you get an image, you may notice that the images go in really big. And so big that it bumped it onto a second page. So if ever that happens, just click on the image and you get this kind of selection box with these handles. And what I do is I pick a handle, usually on the lower right-hand corner, change it, the cursor changes to 2 arrows, and I'm just going to click and hold the mouse button down and drag kind of towards the center of the image. And you see how it's making the box smaller? The idea is you want to make it small enough so that it pops back up onto the page where you wanted it. So there we go. I think I might be able to make it a hair bigger. So there's my smiley hamburger, and then I'm going to click and I'm going to get the insertion point right next to it because I'm going to put a drink to go along with this happy hamburger. So I'm going to insert another image. I'm going to search the web. And let's see if I can find a soda to go with that. So again, I'm going to look for an illustration rather than a photograph. And there is a can of soda. I'll click on that and click insert. And again, it puts a giant can of soda in there. So I have to click on the can. Click and drag the corner handle till the square is small enough so that it fits. It's still not on the first page yet. There we go. All right, so I've got my food and my drink, and I've got my sign. And if I go to the File menu and choose, I'm not going to print it, but if I choose Print, what it does is it does a print preview for me, so it will show me what it will look like if I was going to print it. And this is kind of nice. It gives me an idea how it's all fitting on the page, and that actually looks really good. I could print that out and hang that in my computer lab if I wanted to. So as a review, we learned about text formatting tools. We learned about changing the font, which is what the letters look like, the font size, how big the letters are. We learned about bold, italic, and underline to emphasize text, either make it darker, make it slanted, or put an underline underneath it. And you can remember you can combine these, so I could do italic and underline if I wanted to. Maybe I'll do that, make that a little bit more emphasized. We talked about text color and highlight color. So text color changes the letters themselves. Highlight color changes the background behind the text. And then we talked about alignment. Left align, center align, right align, and justify that we don't use very often. Our text is centered here. And then we inserted our images by clicking where we wanted them to go and choosing Insert Image and searching the web for an image. Anytime we wanted to make a change to text, we had to click and drag to select that text first before making our changes. And that is how you do text formatting in Google Docs in a word processor.